Let's go now to my panel. We're going to kick off a busy week in Canberra. Parliament, of course, tomorrow. It's very ceremonial, though, on the first day. We won't get a question time until Wednesday. Joining me now to discuss it all, political reporter Cam Redden and the host of the Power Hour here on Sky News, the wonderful Gab Power. Well, all smiles this morning, Cam. The PM walking to work and, well, you can see the state of the 48th Parliament. He'd be pretty happy about that. It's a sea of red. We saw a list there of some of his first fortnight priorities. What else can you tell us?
Yeah, the first one off the blocks, Peter, will be that 20% cut to student debt. They've said that for some time. That'll be the first bit that will go through in the coming days. When we do get that first sitting day proper on Wednesday, once the ceremonial bits are done, there'll be changes to things like recognising penalty rates, enshrining that in law. Childcare is the most interesting one. You mentioned that a moment ago. There's an intent from the Coalition for Bipartisanship here. We might not see legislation passed until next week. It will pass in some form. And then we're going to have next month that big meeting of all the Attorneys General, Michelle Rowland and others from states as well, to come up with a more uniform national system of potentially things like working with children's checks and others. But there'll be new legislation on that front next week. What we won't see, Peter, is any movement on that contentious superannuation tax change. The Prime Minister noting ahead of this week that it simply does not have support in the Senate, even though they have a pathway with the Greens. The Greens have said they want that threshold from 3 million lowered down to accounts of above 2 million, and Labor is not keen to budge on that. Remember, he said he wouldn't during the campaign. So one bit of work that Labor will want to get through, they might just have to put that in the freezer for at least a little bit, though, if they're not going to compromise on that figure.
Gab, just on some comments made in the party room by Susan Lee, she's not going to do what the PM says and just get out of the way and give him the parliament for the next 3 years. We've got news poll out, the coalition's primary at 29%. I did say I don't think I've ever seen it at 29%, 40-year low there for the Libs. Well ahead too in terms of 2PP to Labor, 57-43. Resolve poll overnight too, pretty similar to that. Not a great start for the coalition. Not unexpected, but I tell you what, it's pretty demoralising to sit there in the chamber. And of course, when Parliament kicks off formally on Wednesday, it's very, very stark when you look behind you and realise you've got no one with you. You look across at the government and it's absolutely chock-a-block.
Yeah, and this is a shocking result for the coalition out of that news poll. You know, support for the coalition has dropped to its lowest level in 40 years. It's also worth pointing out the news poll found that support for both major parties has dropped to a historic low. But if you look at the coalition, its primary vote on 29%. And if you look at where voters are going, some are going to Labor, but there's also been that uptick in support for Pauline Hanson's One Nation party. It's gained 1.6 percentage points to 8%. And that does not at all surprise me. I mean, if you look at some of the criticism of the coalition, it's been criticised for not being a strong enough opposition. It was criticised for that during the election campaign. And now looking at the data from Newspoll, it appears to be potentially even weaker under Susan Lee. So, look, it's only been a couple of months. Some Australians are still getting to know her, but her approval rating is at 35%. And that is 2 points lower than where Peter Dutton's was at when he was 2 months into his leadership. It's also worth, of course, noting that Anthony Albanese's approval rating isn't great either at 47%. But look, come Wednesday, come question time, I think all eyes will be on Susan Lee.
Look, I know it's our electoral system, but if you take out the Greens' preferential voting boost that Labor gets, 80% return on preferences, he would be nowhere in the position on seats if you look at the primary that Labor got at the election. But it is where we are. We could only be thankful it's not Hare Clark after the weekend in Tasmania. Hey, let's go to the Productivity Summit. The Treasurer, well, it started out as a Productivity Summit. Let's call it the Increasing Taxes Summit because that's what it is. The union movement today, I tell you, all this talk about productivity, what they are demanding now are shorter working weeks and more holidays instead of tax cuts. Now, you square this circle for me, Cam. How does a shorter working week boost productivity?
Yeah, it's not going to happen, Peter. It's flat out as that. I mean, if you boost productivity and then you cut your working hours back, you end up basically where you were. So that's not the point of this. I don't think that's going to happen. It is worth noting, though, and look, we don't often delve into the reading habits of politicians, but the hot book of the month for Labor MPs is this book called Abundance. It kind of tries to put a different spin on left-wing politics and its approach to the economy and things like productivity. And one of the interesting lines in that book, which some of the union movements might be concerned about, is some of the productivity drawbacks of highly unionised, highly organised industries. Of course, that's the foundation of Labor. It's in the DNA, so they're not going to be taking the axe to those industries and trying to really make them change. But in terms of looking for productivity, Peter, that is the secret sauce to get the economy moving. And it does seem like they're going to be open to thinking outside the box. Will that mean higher taxes? Maybe. They don't want to really rule a lot in or out. I guess it more comes down to how do they change the tax mix, where if they raise it somewhere else, they will probably need to cut somewhere else in order to sell that. That would be a really difficult task if it was just a few increases here. Although, of course, they'll always point to lower income taxes that they brought through before the election. Will that change those somewhere else, potentially on businesses or in some other way to try and get productivity moving? It's not an easy task.
Yeah, just on that hot book, it's always interesting. Labor love to find a left-wing idea from overseas and try and import it. You both were probably still in nappies when the old Tony Blairite economics came to Australia, when every Labor MP was banging on about the third way. Unfortunately, I was in Canberra at that time. It didn't solve their problems then. I don't think abundance naturally translates at the moment, but we'll see what happens.